as your Hindu upbringing was dissolving and you were finding that science was offering you the answers that you were looking for, tell me
Right.
what specifically about like science and the connection between the science and the atheism that you're describing there. Tell me um, what was appealing and what was satisfying to you therein that was not within Hinduism.
Right. So I found science to be rational, right? I could look at empirical data, could do repeatable experiments, right? It was something, or it was based on logic, right? All of which interested me. I didn't think that much about the philosophical underpinnings of science. It's only later on I realized it was really based, or somewhere along the way, scientists had drifted off in the direction of atheism, right? Even though I would say the original underpinnings of science, as Stephen Meyer says, it is based on the Judeo-Christian tradition, right? And then the C.S. Lewis's famous thing, right? Men became scientific because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver, right? And so, but I was simply looking at the fact that it was empirical, it was logical, it was mathematical, and all of those appealed to me, right? And it was a way of looking at life, and it described the physical reality really well, right? So that's the first thing I saw about science. That's what attracted me to science. I'm still a scientist. I still like looking through that lens. It was only when I chanced upon what is behind the science. Why do we expect science to be true, right? Then I started looking to see is a lot of them people who are drifting towards atheism, and that creates its own set of problems, right? And which I'm sure we'll get through as we go along here.
Well, I think it's interesting because I can't remember where, but I heard you say somewhere else on the internet that you said Christianity is an engineer's dream. And I
Yes.
think that that statement will strike people as very ironic or very jarring. I don't think that a lot of viewers of my channel will necessarily agree with that, but I also think that it raises a question. What do you mean by that? Why is Christianity an engineer's dream?
Well, I found Christianity to be rational. I was looking to describe reality, right? And so the three things that when I first started looking at Christianity, the three things which immediately struck me was the origin of the universe, right? Questions around the origin of the universe. First of all, nobody really thought the universe even had an origin until, we can talk about Einstein's general theory of relativity and how it led to the Big Bang and, the fact that there was an origin, right? And but to me, there's a philosophical argument to make for the Big Bang as well, and the philosophical argument is this: if we start today, right, and in physics we always would start right now is t equals zero, time equals zero, right? Can we move forward and get to time equals infinity, right? The answer is no, because infinity is a abstract mathematical term. It's not an actual number. We'll never hit infinity. No matter how high a number we hit, we can always go higher than that, right? So we cannot cross infinity. But if the universe did not have a beginning, right, then so it's been around forever. Somehow we've gone through infinite time to come to now, right? So that's obviously not possible, that we cannot have come to now by going through infinite amount of time. So the universe had to have a beginning. So this is not even a physical argument. This is a philosophical argument that the universe had to have a beginning. So then I started to see that there was a connection between the science part of it, the physics side part of it, and if there is an origin of the universe, why is there an origin? Why did it start? When did it start? Right? Who started it off? Right? And I began to realize that science is much better at asking how did it start, right? And getting off into explaining, internal energies and states and entropies and all of these other terms, but not answering the question, why did it start, right? And if I can use a simple analogy, right, of rocks versus rockets, right? If we are close to the cliff of a mountain and we see a rock fall off the mountain down the side of the mountain, you don't need a big explanation. Good physical explanation is perfectly fine. You say probably the soil around the rock eroded and nothing to support the rock, so it just fell down the side of the cliff, right? But if I say there's a spacecraft which was launched off a launching pad, a rocket goes up and it's up there now in exceeds the escape velocity of the Earth, and it's now becomes a communication satellite. There's certainly how it happened, but also why it happened. So somebody saw a way to monetize, uh, uh, Wi-Fi or communications, and someone actually launched a satellite. So there's a who as well,
Hmm.
and why it happened, and not just a how. Right. So even the scientific area, I think those questions are valid. So I started thinking of the origin of the universe and said there must be an explanation which says who started it and why did he or she or it start the universe? Right. That was the first thing that struck me about as I started looking at the science of it and saying there is some metaphysical explanations here we have to chase and not just physical explanations. Right. Um, the second thing which really interested me was the origin of life. Right.
Actually, really quick, Ganesh, if I may, and
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt,
Yeah. Yeah.
but can I ask a clarifying question on origin of the universe before we go to origin of life?
Yes,
And,
please.
and, and that question would be, I've noticed the way that these conversations tend to go between atheists and believers is that essentially everything that a believer ends up saying about God, those same traits basically get applied to the universe. Where if we were to say God is eternal, the response would be the universe is eternal. You sort of hear this play
Right.
itself out in that dialogue between Richard Dawkins and John Lennox. Who created your creator then,
Right.
Mr. Dawkins, and that whole idea. But with what you were saying about how we are in this moment now, therefore we know that eternity cannot go into the past. What if someone were to say, basically the same thing toward God? Does God exist now in this moment? Then does that mean that he also, isn't eternal or something like that, according to that lot? So you always kind of see this like it's the
Yeah.
universe, no, it's God. And I guess my question uh, is there something that you found to be ontologically or categorically different about what God is as compared to what the universe is that makes
Right.
him or she or
Great.
it, as you said, a more logical first thing
Right.
that is eternal and is, in a sense, mysterious and unexplained, as opposed to matter, space, and time
Right.
itself?
That's a phenomenal question. I'll take a shot at answering this. The universe as we think of it is really matter and energy, right? So when we say there was a beginning to the universe, that means before that there was no matter and no energy, right? So from that perspective, the universe could not have been eternal, because we didn't exist at some point, right? Now, when we come to God, um, and we actually look at the Big Bang and say how the universe was grew initially, you see evidence of somebody monkeying with the physics, so to speak, which leads us to this understanding of God, even outside of Christianity, that God is a personal being who had the ability, one, to start off the universe, right? That was it was actually shocking to me to realize that God is a person,
Hmm.
right? And so not only he could make the decision to start the universe, he monkeyed with the physics so the universe grew as he wanted it to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is something the universe itself is not capable of doing, right? The universe doesn't make decisions, right? And it also talks about, it gives me a vision of God of being very smart. It is actually one of the first thing which struck me about God. Not even that he was personal, but that he was very smart. It's like here's someone who really understands math and physics really well, right? And so And you need that as a first cause, and that to me is the differentiator between a first cause, which is a universe, which is actually an argument in going around in circles, because we're asking the question, who created the universe, and can't say the universe created the universe, right? So we know God is personal. We know he's scientific. We know he's very smart. He said things up the way he said it. Now, part of Einstein's theory of relativity pointed to the fact that not only was space created at that point, but time was created at that point as well. So there was no such thing as time before that. So eternity then is really timelessness. Time as a concept didn't exist, right? Now it's hard for us to grasp, obviously, right? But we're trying to describe an infinite God with our finite minds and finite words that we can use to describe it. And there is some limitation there, obviously. That limitation being on our side, though, the limitation is not on God's side.